Thank you, Juho, and thank you. It's really a pleasure to be with you tonight, this evening, to talk to you about front-end cybersecurity. And this talk actually stemmed from a conversation I had with Juho last summer when we were talking about cybersecurity in general, and I was sharing with him some of the challenges that I had faced with the Finnish companion platform, which I will present to you in a moment, and how we faced that. And it was a moment of kind of ranting about some front-end cybersecurity issues, and he suggested that it might actually be a good idea for a talk, and here we are tonight. So thank you, Juho, for this opportunity. So I'm going to share with you some concepts about front-end cybersecurity and how the Finnish companion experience was in hardening the front end. I will briefly, first half of the talk will be mostly talking about what the Finnish companion is and what the platform is, so that you can gain kind of an understanding what's behind the scene and how this hack that we faced last summer happened. And then we will look at another case and another example that is very, very similar, and possible alternatives and solutions. I will not be very prescriptive in terms of telling you what is right and what is wrong. I will just lay out some alternatives and leave the choice for you to know that solutions exist out there. So the Finnish Companion is a powerful website and app that specifically targets Finnish learning pain points. I don't know how many people here speak fluently Finnish. One. So it's not two. So it's 99.9% don't speak or speak very little Finnish. And if I ask you why, probably maybe some of you have been here for a couple of months, but can some of you shout out why you haven't learned Finnish, or why you haven't tried, or you have tried and you're facing some difficulties?
A couple of months isn't enough.
A couple of months isn't enough, yes?
It's like 40 different endings to every word.
There you go, 40 different endings.
The words are so long that it's hard to remember.
The words are so long that it's hard to remember.
And if you dare to ask someone something in Finnish, you don't understand the answer.
You don't understand the answer because it's either chopped or it's super fast and you can't get it. And the accent, the murres, because different regions have different accents. Yes, correct. So when I shared a similar experience. I moved to Finland 2 years ago. And first, when I moved to Finland, I met somebody. I moved for work. And as a medical doctor, you have to speak Finnish to Finnish patients. And that was expected to me by law, by regulation. So I had to learn Finnish as fast as possible, as fast as I could. But I met somebody who had been 15 years in Finland, who was a researcher, phenomenal brain researcher, neuroscience researcher, but didn't learn a word of Finnish. And I was like, you work literally in cognitive science. How come you haven't learned? And that got me curious on the why. And if you talk to anyone about their experience of learning Finnish, they will describe it as this. They crucify themselves, they jump off the cliff. It's a complete nightmare. Whereas this is Spanish in red, in green it's Italian, or French in blue it's Italian, and so on. And then Finnish is completely next level. But that's actually factual. It's not just subjective. The United States Foreign Service Institute, the Department of State institute charged of teaching languages to US diplomats, has considered Finnish being one of the hardest languages to learn. It comes in the second category after Chinese, Arabic, and Korean and Japanese. And it takes about 44 weeks in order to be able to hold a conversation at the water fountain at your workplace. So the main pain points in terms of learning Finnish is inefficient and scattered Finnish learning resources. If you want to learn German, if you want to learn French, you actually have those resources. They're the so-called the Bibles of the language. You have their conjugation and so on. They are references, very famous. The second problem is overwhelming conjugation. And it really, the meaning changes if you add just one letter. Tulen means I'm coming, and tulen is of the wind. So you have to be careful about when you pronounce it and when you write it. And then there's also phrase construction challenges, because if the way you build the phrase, and if by any chance you add 2 dots above a letter, it completely changes the meaning, as well as when you pronounce it. Nainko varin, did I see wrong? Nainko varin, should I marry grandpa? So the pronunciation is very important, at least those slight pronunciations. And that's why sometimes when you try to speak Finnish or basic phrase to a Finn, they will look at you very confused, because you probably are saying something that means different thing. And then finally, there are limited practice opportunities. As you said, you try to practice, they either speak too fast or you don't understand it because of accents or because they speak English back to you. And that's deeply rooted in Finnish culture of politeness and courtesy. They just don't want to embarrass you that you have to go through the hurdle of speaking Finnish. And then, of course, you don't get the opportunity to practice because they are introverted and shy, and therefore this is probably one of the most difficult social situations Finns can face. This is a very good book. It's called Finnish Nightmares. I highly recommend it. So the solution is kind of, I was thinking about, okay, I have kind of 1 year, 1.5 years that I really need to be super fluent at Finnish. How am I do it? How am I going to do it? And the solution was a gym buddy that helps you lift a heavier weight long enough so that you can develop the force to lift it by yourself. What do I mean by that? You go to the gym, you always have somebody who's a coach or a friend who helps you lift that heavy weight that you can't still lift by yourself. But he helps you just enough so that you can develop that force so that you can start to do it by yourself. This is exactly the analogy of learning Finnish with the Finnish companion. The weights are the Finnish, and this is the Finnish learner trying his best to develop muscles to speak Finnish, and then this is the Finnish companion. So concretely, the Finnish companion is a website and app that's designed to help users to learn Finnish by using tools that specifically address Finnish learning challenges. I will go through all of those components, but we have a dictionary, a conjugator, and a reverse conjugator. Takes a long word that's hard to pronounce and breaks it down for you so that you can know how to pronounce it. There's a very original repetitive exercise platform that I will share with you, and browser extensions and learning platform. So let's look at the word breakdown. Anyone has an idea what this is? Oh, just the Finn.
Have to do with like an aircraft mechanic.
Yes, you're in a very far.
Funnily enough, my brother was one of those, like exactly that job.
Okay, so you're one in a 10,000 chances
Yeah.
that, or 100,000 chances that this might happen. Okay.
It's the same thing that you have mentioned, and then I noticed that oppilas, maybe some student.
Okay, excellent. This is the longest word of Finnish language. It's very daunting and very intimidating when you see it like this. Probably if you don't have your brother who is an engineer, an aircraft engineer, or you know oppilas and you just spotted it there, it's going to be extremely intimidating and hard to...
One word, not two.
Two.
That's two words. Or one.
No, that's one. That's just one word, but several components stacked together.
Put it in smaller font and so it fit this one, no break.
It's hard actually to fit it in one slide. It has to be 2 lines. So if we put it in the Finnish companion word breakdown, it actually breaks it down into pronounceable chunks. And it gives you the original word, which is lenta, to fly, kone, machine, suihku, shower or air, turbini, turbine, motori is engine, apu, I think helper, aid, mecanico is engineer, ali, that I don't know, upseeri, oppilas is student. So if you put that long word in Finnish companion in work breakdown, it goes from this to this. It breaks it down into very pronounceable chunks. Lentokonis wehku turbini motori apumekanico aliupseri oppilas. Super easy, your eyes can recognize it. We went from this to this. And then it becomes, suddenly Finnish becomes less daunting and less intimidating. So we go from a more complicated word like this to this. Terveyskeskusmaksu, health center payment. So another one of the challenges in Finnish, which I noticed didn't exist and I was really facing, was to find words which were already conjugated, 40 conjugations, 40 forms, but you wouldn't be able to know what's the original word. You wouldn't know what's the original meaning. And that leaves you really confused and it slows down the learning process. So what I did here, for example, you type talossa, which means in the house, and it actually gives you back the original form and the meaning at the same time. So it tells you that it means in the house, but it's just house. And it becomes very much less intimidating. Same thing for kavelivat. They have walked. And suddenly it tells you, okay, this is from the verb kavella, they in the past. And then we develop tools and apps that can be used. For example, this one is very similar to the Spotlight, Mac OS Spotlight, where you just have the kind of the bar that shows and you can type anything. And here you can quickly type something and say, okay, I would like the reverse conjugation. And it immediately tells you it's from the verb sanoa and then gives you the template as well. So it becomes automatic. When you see a word that is päivystys, you know that is conjugated like vastaus. And it becomes automatic. You're less and less intimidated, you become more familiar. This has been converted, and I will show you later, into an exercise tool. You get to pick what you want to practice. So you say, I would like to practice the partitive form. I would like words that are similar to päivystys. And then it gives you every single word possible that is similar to päivystys. And you just keep drilling that as much as possible. And it says you have audio feedback, you have pronunciation feedback. If you type something that is wrong, it doesn't let you input if you type something wrong. If you type something correctly, you get the immediate feedback.
Kansanäänesty. Tutkimuslaitosta.
Okay. Phrase construction challenges, similar things. It gives you a phrase and it gives you what you have to say in your native language. So it could be English, it could be Ukrainian, it could be Farsi, it could be Italian. And it gives you the unconjugated words disordered. You have to place them in the right order, but also choose the right form. This will also create. So you see how it is complicated to build a simple sentence in Finnish. Without visual cues like this, it becomes harder. And I will tell you the logic and the inspiration behind that in a moment. Similar thing with Finnish TV. Some of you maybe you know, some of you don't. Finnish money, tax money, actually, you contribute to something that is public and free called Yle Areena. It's a Finnish version of Netflix, and you get to watch everything on Finnish Yle, at least public TV, for free, including TV shows and so on. If you go and watch those TV shows, they are all in Finnish. Unless they are international, they will have English version and English subtitles. All are in Finnish and they don't have any other subtitle than Finnish. And it's most of the times in murre, in dialect. So you end up looking at subtitles that are very fast, not translated, and you're confused at what's going on and you're trying to learn. It's very, very overwhelming pretty quickly. So this is a Finnish Companion browser extension where you can actually watch and get the translation in real time of what is being displayed and what is being said. And you get to pick your language, your native language, and you see the Finnish version and the English version at the same time, your native language version. So how did it all start? As Juho said, I'm a medical doctor and a neuroscientist, and I was previously working in the Bay Area as my own entrepreneur and working for Google Singularity University. And I had a professional career in the past as a pianist and a composer. And I will tell you in a moment how that ties to this. Since a kid, I was coding, mostly in Atari, learning basic stuff. It was just something that my father gave me this Atari and was like, you want to play games? Just try to do them yourself. I was a big fan of Delphi. It was something that I grew up with. Then PHP 4 was a revolution for me. I was already building PHP pages with front page, and that was just something very big for me. This was the Bible for me when I was a kid. I built some Yahoo clones, as you might see here. I was cloning things. Then Macromedia Director 7, which was very interesting because there was this trend at that moment where there was the CDs, like interactive CDs with interactive interfaces that were really, really good. Then Flash 5 came, and then Dreamweaver, as well as Cold Fusion was also something that was doing was going in sync with Flash and so on. So that was the web, that was the front end, that was the interactive front end. I was a happy kid back then. I completely disconnected from coding. And then around 2015, 2016, started slowly back to transition in, and then I come back and there's this whole different word that I didn't understand. React, state, and things like that. And we will get to that in a moment. So as a professional pianist, this is me performing in New York and in some other places. When you see someone playing piano like this, the first impression is, oh my God, how can they do it in front of hundreds of persons without even thinking? And it looks so complex and so fast. How can they do it? This is the same thing related to that. When you see great tennis players doing fantastic moves in such an elegant way, in completely unexpected ways, physically almost unexplainable, that's because it's trained and repeated many times. And there's actually a science and art behind it, and that's kind of summed up in a word called sprezzatura, Italian word, where it's kind of effortless grace in the ability to perform complex tasks, doing it naturally without any effort. But this is not happening by chance. It's actually a science and an art, which includes exercises and practice. And what do you see the common point between piano, tennis players, and special forces, for example, is that they all keep practicing and practicing and drilling and drilling and drilling specific exercises until they get good at it. Here, the tennis player, for example, she's practicing the forehand, and then she has to go and then shoot a backhand, and she has to do this specific foot move. So she's practicing her foot move. This is action shooting, and this is kind of, or tactical shooting, and it's fast pace and precision. And you have to do it with accuracy and speed. So it's a different skill. And the pianists, they just keep repeating for hours and hours and hours. So those were the pre-existing ingredients to put something like the Finnish Companion, coding skills, medicine and neuroscience, and then kind of this understanding of how you can take something like a pianist from some sonata or a music piece that you have never played before, perform it in front of 1,000 people in 6 months without even thinking, closing your eyes and going into like a meditative trance state. So the Finnish Companion initially was this. When I was learning started learning Finnish, I had a Google spreadsheet. I just put an API call that went out through a Google script, and I was doing the translations, automatic translations, and you can see here I had classes, my class dates, and I was just like piling up, and then it just was piling and piling. Then I was like, okay, maybe I should go to a database, and I migrated to Airtable. It became more interactive, more connected, and still I had a UI where I could actually manage things. And then I went to using flashcards and Anki cards and develop my own Python plugins, but this was not really working very well. So a linguistic engine behind the scenes adapted the very old one into Golang, which now becomes the core of the Finnish Companion. Initially was using MongoDB, and I will tell you how the hacking of the MongoDB happened and why we moved to using protobufs and Cap and Proto. Cap and Proto is just kind of a faster version of protobufs. Protobufs are already very fast, but Cap and Proto are extremely fast. And if you have latency constraints, I highly recommend using Cap and Proto. And then an open API, of course, that's publicly facing. Anyone can use it. And as you said, difficult words and long words to pronounce, you can just go to the API and then type your word, and you get actually the word broken down. It gives you this object, this property, easy pronounceable, and you can just use it. As I told you, this Spotlight extension, Spotlight kind of version. So you can type anything. A keyboard extension, which goes with a few apps like Alfred and others. You just type and it immediately does translation on your text editor. Just hit the keyboard shortcut. You can type anything. You type Päivystys and you're like, okay, how is the EEN form? And it immediately conjugates it back to you, pastes it on your text editor, and you have it there ready. So it really speeds up the way your relationship with Finnish becomes very different. This is why I call it Finnish Companion augmenting the Finnish learner. Just like helps you get that point. This is for Finnish language learners. We use music. I think I played that in June, and we had our YouTube video muted in that part. So this has actually a very good neuroscientific principle. We use like those crunchy bytes that give you this mini dopamine rush to memorize words. If you have this song that you're listening and it's less than 50 seconds excerpt and you just keep repeating it with the lyrics, you know that ylivoimainen means amazing. And that will just stick to your head. So mobile buttons and bubbles as well that we're still prototyping, but you can, when you're on the go, you're in front of the cashier, you really need to say something. And it's almost instantaneous. So the Finnish Companion, where was I? Sorry.
So
yes.
you have two hovering accessibility buttons for
Correct.
English,
Yes.
Finnish.
Yes. In this particular prototyping, it's an actual Android app that allows you to do that. But we've developed also our own accessibility button, and the app is called, I think, Ankidroid something. MacroDroid. It allows you to do that. This is the browser extension that I told you about. It's just a video to show you exactly how it happens. And this is a basic feature that, unfortunately, Yle Arena didn't have. Correct. Yes.
Does it work with any website?
No, it works with it. This is specifically made for Yle Arena. But I mean, if you're interested to do it for any other website, you're welcome to deploy it and use the tools, the toolkit.
But for an example, if any movie with subtitle,
Yeah.
English subtitle,
Yes.
if I install this browser extension, will that convert it to my wish language or?
This browser extension, no. But I mean, that's an idea that can be done, yes. Technically, it's completely feasible. But the user, the product focus here is only for Yle Arena, because they already have a huge selection. They have a huge selection of of movie and titles and TV shows, but that's usable to any other front, correct? So then we have developed slowly into design system. That was the purpose of the call last June, and we went from pre-existing ingredients, which was kind of childhood coding skills and neuroscience and the art of kind of understanding how complex mastery is done, to an actual Finnish language learning ecosystem with the core engine, a platform, an API, and the satellite apps and the design system, tiny components. So today it's a Finnish learning tool with design systems and mindset and methodology to learn Finnish. And it's also not for profit. So it's free, remains so, will remain so, with very specific minimalist or minimalistic design and user experience. We don't clog them with ads. We don't clog them with useless information that just saturates, that provokes sensory saturation. And we got sponsorships, grants, and eventually also consulting. So everything was going well. There was media features and startup competitions, prizes, and so on. About 3,000 users per month, unique users per month. And more than 10 universities and schools across Finland using it now. Until one day, we got some reports about users making simple requests, simple dictionary requests, where this was supposed to be showing into this. And I was like, okay, something is wrong. I did it myself, repeated it, recreated it, yes, okay. So I went into exploring what's happening and quickly found out that the API went silent. So there's no response. And as you can see, this is the hyphenated property, the one that makes complicated Finnish words become easier to read, actually comes from the engine. So it's returning. The translation also comes from the engine, and it's coming back. But the rest comes from the database, and it's not coming back. So I was like, okay, let's look what's happening in the database. And this is how my MongoDB was looking. Please contact us with 0.015 Bitcoin. I don't know how much was Bitcoin last year, 0.015. So I kept looking. I started really looking, and it was okay. A ransomware who's telling me don't panic, and that don't panic really pissed me off. I wasn't pissed off because my data was encrypted. I was pissed off of the don't panic. How do you want me not to panic? So your database is safe and backed up. I was like, okay, well, first of all, good news, I already have backed up the database very regularly. So that was a good practice I was maintaining. It saved me here. Second, the data is mostly static. It was a dictionary. So harm wasn't really bad. I still had that data. So what happened was that I tried to re-upload the data, and it wasn't functioning. It didn't. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I wasn't able to do it well. I kept investigating, and the VPS logs indicated my server was not showing any violation. Some attempts to log in as the usual scanning, nothing bad, with all denied attempts. Cloudflare showed me multiple access attempts coming from Russia, and mostly. And then the MongoDB revealed instances of unauthorized access. And then when I went into the MongoDB authorized access, I literally saw the drop command in the Mongo shell. So he literally dropped everything. So how did that happen? Because like this is I can't understand. I'm trying to respect as much as possible the best practices. How did that happen? And I kept looking, and I looked into the Docker and so on and what was happening, and I realized something that I didn't even know and I wasn't aware of. I was using MongoDB 4.4 last year. At that time, the version I think was 7. So that was already a huge red flag. And there were many corrections that were happening back then, and many reports of MongoDB ransomwares happening to different industries, either in the healthcare sector, in the military sector. So I wasn't a kind of a weird, isolated case. And this is actually, there's a whole industry behind the scenes. I was discussing with a very good friend of mine who's a cybersecurity expert last summer. She came to give a talk here, and she was showing just the dark behind the scenes industry and supply chain of ransomware. And there's a whole chain where this is the pyramid, and you have operators, and you have individuals whose whole job, sole job, is to provide tools, and even they provide them as a membership fee. You can even find, I was very surprised when we had a discussion with her, and there were even LLMs that were membership, that you could pay as a membership fee, and then they were malicious and help you do malicious things. And I mentioned that in last June about how even ChatGPT was able to be hijacked into telling it how to make crystal meth. Initial attempt was no, some hijacking text, and then suddenly just literally gave you the whole recipe. So it is a supply chain, and there's a whole industry that is actually there. So the immediate radical measures obviously was to update the version, backup, restore the data from the backups, and Cloudflare, Country Block, all those countries that where the attempts were coming from, that solved pretty much the issue. And then we later on, and I will describe it later, we later on migrated to using protobufs and then Kappan Proto, which run in the same instance, Docker instance, so no database calls, and it's just faster.
If you block those countries,
yeah.
in those countries, customer will see the UI, or everything will be okay? Only block
no,
those.
it's blocking everyone from that country.
Oh,
unfortunately.
So no one access.
So the Finnish companion is not accessible from Russia.
Oh, okay.
It's a radical measure, but I have peace of mind, and it's also it might sound a bit provocative, but it actually aligns also with the goals of the platform. It was something that I was thinking very carefully before doing it, because it's very hard for people who are outside of Finland to really learn Finnish. In Finland, in the Finnish environment, it's already extremely hard. For someone to learn it and find the motivation to do it abroad, I honestly think there's a very, very, very slight chance. And that is not the market I am providing and catering for. The Finnish companion is catering to people who are seriously in Finland, want to learn Finnish and use it for their daily life or for their work. So it just made sense. And I had peace of mind from any hacking attempts.
So like 1 or 2 people did that, for that reason whole country, like.
It's not only Russia, by the way. I did a reverse thing, which was only Norway, Sweden, Finland, the Baltics, and Denmark can access Finnish companion. All the rest is rejected, because it's very difficult to learn Finnish outside of from Finland. And most of the pings or the attempts were either from Russia, from China, and from the US. Those were the top 3 in Cloudflare showing up. So, and I don't have users anyway from those countries, so it makes sense. But yeah, it is unfortunate. If there's one very motivated person in China who really, really, really wants, yeah, it's unfortunate. So, but also it saves the platform, saves time, energy, and all of that, and peace of mind from hackings. A more recent case, which happened actually 2 weeks ago, as well as related to front-end cybersecurity. Does anyone know this website?
Yes.
Okay, I see a couple of yeses. Make money, become a freelancer, invest in crypto, teach you how to be a man.
It would be better if it could be just freelancer. It's just like do trading.
Everything.
Yeah.
Even cybersecurity in the entrepreneurship part and the artificial intelligence part. So this is a self-help, self-development community created by someone named Andrew Tate, who for some particular reasons is covered by the media related to two major issues. One is about moral conduct, and the second one is about tax allegations related either to this platform or to his other businesses. And what happened was that 2 weeks ago, that platform was hacked and it was breached in with almost 800,000 users. Data was leaked and stolen. 794,000 usernames, more than 300,000 unique email addresses, and public and private chat logs leaked. This happened while he was live streaming, and this was this Discord clone he used for this website and community. They started to bomb the emoji section or drop-down menu with LGBTQ icons and emojis, because he is kind of there was allegations that he's homophobic and so on. They posted these pictures of him in the chat rooms and started to put letters in the drop-down menu about him and so on. And this happened while he was live streaming. The data was leaked and is available in a website that lists this kind of things. And 14 gigabytes of data of all the 75 video recordings of his meetings, his courses, which he sells, people who pay $8,000 per year, videos were leaked. The staff chats and all his chats with his staff were leaked, as well as 14 other gigabytes of data from logs and so on. So that's very damaging. And compared, of course, to Finnish Companion, which was kind of the consequence of random scanning, and it just happened that it was a hit on Finnish Companion for some reason. This one was not random. This was a targeted one because of his high profile, and it was clearly activism. So how did this happen? First thing, when you look at his website and you look at the tech stack using any of the tools available, you see that it's in TypeScript. He's using CS type with CSS. There's some WebSockets and REST API calls, and for his mobile app, he's using Capacitor. For the front end, he was using Next.js just for the sign-up process, and just bundled it, and it was using Vite. And the back end initially came out as Rust Rocket, and that caught my attention as to, like, why would he necessarily use Rust Rocket? I mean, you have to really hate yourself to use Rust to build a back end, unless you really have some secure reasons why. I personally wouldn't pick Rust for that particular use case, but there was a reason why, and I will tell you in a second. And he was using Cloudflare. Turns out that Rust Rocket was because he was using Revolt Chat, which is a clone of Discord. So he was not using Discord, he was using the clone called Revolt. And a simple API call. Simple API call. And you already know the version he's using. 0.5.5. Just curious, and you just keep looking, and you see that there's already a version 0.7. He's using 0.5. It's called Revolt, and then you start looking around, and it says that the author and the main author of Revolt wrote the blog post in 2022 saying that Andrew Tate is actually stealing my software without just respecting all the licensing and so on. Now, this is very interesting because of the version discrepancy. You log in the platform. You already started to look into the logs. It doesn't look good. First thing, by the way, looking into the code and the JavaScript in the bundle, there's unobfuscated JavaScript comments in the obfuscated JS bundle. That made reverse engineering super easy. You already know what's happening because it's full of comments. And he was using the version 0.5, which had some critical vulnerabilities that were patched later on. And he was using that old version because he had that licensing issue with the maker of Revolt. And you go in the console, you type something, which I'm hiding here because I think we're recorded, so I don't want that to be on the internet, but type something equal 1. So you just make it true. And suddenly you become the whole master admin. You're in God mode. That's how easy it was. So they started playing with it and went from, this is him, his profile, and he charges people to be in this platform. And he uses all those bots and scripts similar to Discord to gain privileges, and he charges more, and he requests people to be on a 30 days or 60 days streak online on the platform so that he kind of like reinforces your brain wires and so on. It make you kind of become addicted to the platform. It's very reinforcement stuff. But the privileges allowed those who got in to actually time him out. So he was muted. He's not able to text on his own server. They had the ability to ban him. But what was fun is that they started also to go after the staff people. And you can see here it says verified real word staff account. And they timed that person until 2050. And then they even were allowed to time out, to kick individuals, which technically banned them, but still kept charging them. So it was just becoming completely uncontrollable, and that happened over the course of many hours. Then they started to cause client crash by writing some obfuscated scripts in normal messages, seemingly normal messages in this Discord clone, which would cause the client to go blank. No matter how often you refreshed, it still was blank. And you had to go on another device, the phone, change the channel, and like cancel that so that you can go back on your computer and be able to refresh it. So there were actually pre-existing ingredients for this catastrophe. There was an old version of fill in the blank dependency. In this particular case, it was the Rust Revolt clone, the Discord clone. In my case, it was MongoDB 4. Access to comments on the bundle, which allowed very easy reverse engineering. And here I think it's very, very critical to pay attention nowadays, where LLMs are used more and more. They are becoming the norm in coding, whether one doesn't know how to code and learning, or whether one just wants to boost productivity. You will notice that LLMs always leave comments in the code. And it's very critical to pay attention to those comments, not to leave them in production. And very often you will think, yes, of course I will not, but often they will end up because of time constraints and deliverables and so on, and deadlines. The former two exposed, because when I showed you those leaks, of course they trolled him and so on. This is how they did it, through the admin kind of God mode. But then these leaks were actually video links, and they were also MongoDB chat logs. So they had access also to the MongoDB. And they did that by exploiting also a misconfiguration vulnerability, but they got access at least to where the MongoDB address is, what's the port number and so on, by gaining that first access through the God mode. And that's how more than 900 user accounts, 800,000 user accounts plus the emails were leaked. And now this is kind of my plea to where I decided to move back to the monolith architecture for the Finnish companion. I'm going to share with you the logic and the reasoning behind it after those two use cases, real use cases of how a front end can turn into an actual nightmare. And of course, there are opinions and debates, and I'm pretty sure there will be interesting debates even after this talk. But I will just share with you what was my reasoning and how I saw it and my thinking process and why I ended up doing a monolith. Initially, the Finnish companion was in Nuxt. It is still partially in Nuxt. If you look at the current monoliths and kind of the server-side first architecture, it has very specific good benefits that client-side necessarily don't provide. First of all, I still am fond, as I told you when I shared with you my coding learning journey when I was a kid, PHP 4, and at the time also there was ASP. And when you tried to kind of find your way in a PHP website or like try to find vulnerabilities, so I did that a lot during my weekends as a teenager. Once you hit a PHP page that is rendering an HTML file, it's almost you're hitting what I call a gray wall. You're hitting a wall. There's particularly nothing you can do to go around it, unless there are some inputs or inputs that are not cleaned up and so on. And this is where you go into those injects and so on. This is not the case in GS and client side. As we saw, there was comment, which is code and bundle code that is right there that the user can see. And for me, that was very disturbing to see that I just go there and I see all my code there for the user. And of course, not the random user is going to use it, but the malicious, someone with a malicious intent. And nowadays, because of LLMs and malicious LLMs that are also available, the person doesn't even have to think. They do have tools that run multiple tests at the same time using the malicious LLMs to find exactly your own customized critical point. So for me at that point, I think it's just safer to move to server logic. And I know that server logic, you're just hitting a wall. There's no way you're going to go through it. It reduces the attack surface because you have fewer entry points. You can have .php file and you can just erase that .php, for example. The author will very have a difficult time figuring out what's even your architecture behind or what's the language you're using behind the scenes. There's more simplified dependency management and proven security patterns that we will look into. One of them that I'm very fond of is session-based, cookie-based sessions, which for me are still, I'm using them with the Finnish companion and they are the holy grail because you can still cancel a session from the server side. And I think this is very important. And then finally, what I was saying is minimizing the code exposure to end users. They don't know what's the logic. You can't know. There are even some government websites that I had a client who wanted to audit certain websites, and there was a government website they wanted to audit. Turned out they were using very old internet server version, IIS something, but it was still very robust because there was no way around it. It just delivered an HTML file, and you can't do anything about it. In the case of Finnish companion, I was disturbed by the endpoints exposure and the code exposure. So this is the current student version of the Finnish companion, which is based on Flask. Fast, easy. We don't it handles 3,000 users. It's MPA, multi-page application, so it literally browses between each and each. They can do their own tasks as they want, and they have their own. There's an authorization. They have to log in their account. The reason why I tried and started with Flask is because it was very easy to put in together and just scaffolding very quickly authentication and authorization, whereas it's a complete nightmare with client side and so on. And we wanted to keep that control on the server side. So when I was faced with this choice, there were a couple of options, and my decision matrix I put literally grid, and I was looking at which ones are meeting my criteria, and the criteria that I was looking for was robustness, server side, easy scaffolding, and building quickly the authentication and authorization side. And then if there are some extra bonuses, then yes. For example, Lucky, which is a Crystal-based platform. Crystal is kind of a very similar language to Ruby. It catches everything on the compile time, as well as it's type safe. So you're literally delivering a binary to your server, which I'm very fond of this idea of delivering a binary. Laravel as well is for me the equivalent of the 2013 Ruby on Rails. You quickly can just get started with all the protections and industry standard protections, and you don't have to think about the details of it, especially when you're focused on the business side, or you don't have enough staff, or you don't have enough manpower. This can be very, very, very helpful. Flask, as I mentioned, which I am using, and then Phoenix as well. But they all share one common thing, which is session-based cookie authentication. Everything of the standard security, industry standard security protections from the CSRF and so on. And server-side session storage. But one can say, okay, but what about Next.js and its page routing, and it has SSR, it has server-side rendering, and Next is also doing server components and so on. I don't think that my point here is, of course, to trash Next.js or oppose Next.js. Next.js still has its use cases, but it has to align with some use cases where you have to know what you're getting in particular, that you have a JavaScript bundle that is exposed. If you're okay with that, that's fine. But I was able, and I didn't show this, but there was some Finnish learning websites which had very interesting data, and I just plain simply looked at the API calls and then reversed that, did that on my own scripts. It's not very hard to spoof the client headers to make the server believe that you're still coming from a genuine browser. Make those calls, scrape the data using for an LLM, customize it for your own solution. And this is a clear case of IP theft. This is how competitors can actually reverse engineer your own solutions if you have your APIs exposed. And I really cared about that. If you expose an API with data that can be scraped, make sure that you're okay with that, as it is the case for me, because the dictionary data that I'm using is already open source and it's Wiktionary. So I'm fine with that if you want to scrape Wiktionary that is already there available. But if you have proprietary data, if it's industry data, if it's government, if it's healthcare, becomes a different case and different discussion. It's a different, of course, different mental model, which I had struggled with, especially authentication and authorization on the client side and handling that. And then when I had to switch to the server side only, server side rendering only while I was managing the session, it just got too complex to manage. And it wasn't even the purpose and the point of the platform. The purpose and the point of the platform was just to make sure users can authenticate, and then let's focus on the business side. So this authentication complexity, or the GWT tokens as well, was something that for me was a bit disturbing, to allow someone just to go with a token. And of course you can make it expire at a certain date, but ideally not too long, but not too short. And all those compromises didn't really fit with the Finnish companion. And then the increased attack surface, as I was mentioning about the API routes. Yes, but I really need reactivity in monoliths. How can I do that? Actually, there are solutions. Inertia, for example, allows you to do that with Laravel. That they exist like those bridges, and each one of them, of course, Inertia has its own architecture. It allows you to use, actually with Laravel or with Symfony, I think, PHP. You can use React, you can use Vue, you can even use Svelte. I've seen some as well. Livewire, which is its own thing for Laravel. Hotwire and Turbo initially for Rails, but you can adapt it for any other framework. Unicorn, for example, for Django. And you can have reactivity for Django using Unicorn. And then Phoenix Livewire, which for me in terms of reactivity is one of the best because of it uses WebSockets. And WebSockets is also something that I have been looking at as a way to kind of add a layer of obfuscation over the normal HTTP REST API calls. It's a little bit more difficult for a normal user to really scrutinize WebSockets call exchanges. And then as good as Phoenix, I think Quick also with their resumability and their streaming concept, which I think is also very interesting because you do the side rendering and then it just streams it as a small kind of islet or small code, small chunk of code that is delivered there. But those are the same attributes that those share together. Livewire and Inertia, for example. You don't have your API surface exposed. You still have reactivity. It's still in the client side, but you're still master of the server side, and it's built for that purpose. You're not just having a tool that is free and just do whatever you want with it. I think that was very, very good for someone who is focused more on the business side. Hotwire as well, as I said, Phoenix with very good stateful WebSocket connections. It completely gets rid of all the rest and so on. I mean, you can also do that hard code yourself if you're really into that. A Flask with WebSockets, and it does all of that. You can manage it if you want. And Quick. And then server rendered components and web components, I think also can be very useful because they still isolate the usage into a session. And this goes with Flash. 20 years ago or 25 years ago, that was exactly how Flash worked. It loaded the whole SWF file on the front end, and then it made subsequent calls to the server, which was oftentimes ActionScript called Fusion. It would make those calls, and you didn't really have a hand on that front end. Even if you downloaded that SWF file offline, tried to go into it, you still had an interface that was making calls somewhere else. And that for me, I think is what server rendered components are doing, is just giving you an isolated session or isolated page, sorry, not session, but a page where everything's happening there reactively, but it's not, you're not supposed to have all the burden of gluing the code with the back end, if that makes sense. There's this website which I sometimes use as a resource for finding interesting resources. It's called OSS Insights. And this is a list that I have created on there. It's a collection called Reactive Monolith Frameworks. and it lists them, and you keep tracking of what those are new as well and showing up, and you can compare them and so on. And for now, there's Livewire, Phoenix, Hotwire Turbo, and Django. So I think I'm not sure if I'm beyond time or still have time, but I'm glad, at least after this presentation, that you've learned a little bit about Finnish Companion and basic front-end hardening concepts and lessons from real use cases that happened literally 2 weeks ago. But more importantly, I think you have learned how to pronounce lentokone suihku turbini motori apomeccanico ali upseri oppilas. Thank you very much.
We have like half an hour for questions. So,
Excellent. You can.
can you repeat the questions?
Yes, I repeat them, yes.
Also, a very unique take on security.
Sorry?
I said very unique take on security, so thank you for that. But I'm not clear on the first attack that you talked about. Like, what exactly was the point of attack? Was it that your MongoDB instance was public or didn't have any network ACLs? And the solution doesn't really fix that problem if you had something like that. And the second question I had was around what do you think is wrong about JWT? So just see, it was a con in every framework that you listed that, JWT, it uses JWT, so I just want to understand.
Yes.
What do you think?
So 2 questions. First one is, I'm repeating your questions. First one is, you're not sure how exactly it happened with the MongoDB and how the solution actually fixed it. And then the GW tokens and why I'm against GWT tokens. So the first one, actually, what happened was that I was using the version 4.4. That was my first lead on what was happening. I didn't at the time understand really, really well what happened, but clearly they did get shell access to my Mongo shell. They got access to my Mongo shell, which meant they either were doing brute force, or that for sure. I think because the code was not anywhere, the credentials. But second, that what worried me most is they knew the IP address of the server and the port number. So they did get there in the logs. I could see clearly that in the logs they dropped. They did do the drop. Version 4.4, so there was some misconfiguration. I think I still don't know how they did gain access, how did they get the password. The username was root. That was a mistake I made. But the password was long, not too long. Well, actually it wasn't too long, it was 12 characters, but they could brute force it. You can say, okay, well, they tried. But I think it was the misconfiguration at the 4.4, and they were just randomly scanning, and somehow there was a hit. What I found out later, and this is something that I didn't put in the slides, but because I was really, really ashamed of that, was that when I went through my repo, I actually had // on the URI and one view component. I had // a GS comment where I said localhost or 19 colon the port number. I didn't put the credentials, and I felt safe, overconfident, because I put the IP address and the port number. And it was a hard to guess port number, at least not the typical one. So that's how it ended up. And I'm pretty sure, I don't have the final proof on that, but I found on that the commit that I had pushed and which was on production, which was live, did have that comment on the client side showing in the bundle. So it's very likely that's how they did it. But I still don't know. I think they brute forced it. They were trying. Second, how did that fix it? So what I did was to restore the data, change the username, change the password, block all the calls from any IP coming from those countries. I never had any other issue. Also, it was very amateur from my part to have a root username with all the privileges, so I created another one specifically for that usage. It was a web client kind of with no privileges except read and list. So that solved the issue technically. Unless you have some other suggestions, then I'm...
No. So that means like it was like publicly accessible, that IP and the DB instance. So you could have just blocked the database on those IP ranges like you described. So you didn't have to block the application, but just allow your backend or your server to access the DB, but not anybody, right? So
Yes, that is also a possibility.
yeah, what I'm saying is if you did that, irrespective of client side or server side, it wouldn't matter because
That was, yes, that was actually a vulnerability, yes. Yes, thank you for that. I will actually take care of that. You just knew that, yeah. And then your other question was with GWT tokens. I have nothing against GWT tokens. I just think that I think GWT tokens are good for obviously mobile phones and so on and the go. It's not the usage of Finnish Companion because the mobile version, for example, which is still in prototype, doesn't require you to log in. So it's just simple calls, so we don't need authorization and login. Then the other side of authorization and login is to actually track your progress, track things, and I just don't feel comfortable with giving a session that is going to last 120 days because you can use that token with the example that I was giving of scraping. And I just don't feel comfortable with that. It's an opinion, of course, but for the exact use case, I think when you log in with the session-based, it's a usage time. You can still have it for a couple of days. It's still there. You can log out, but I can also log you out if I see that you're actually scraping data of if you're doing something malicious that is not supposed to be. That was my way around misusing the GWT tokens. And I tried that with a platform that is really very famous and known. They use GWT tokens. You take the token, you can even refresh it. You have the code to refresh it. You spoof the identity of the client, and you're scraping data. And apparently their rate limit isn't very efficient. And then you have proprietary data. That's my issue with GWT tokens. I think it has very good usage for mobile, but I think when you want really hardened solutions, I don't believe GWT tokens are for that. And if you look at hardcore solutions, either in the government industry, in the healthcare industry, which for me are kind of the standard usually, look at authorization and authentication, they don't use that much. I haven't seen GWT tokens in hospital applications. You have to go through multiple steps, and each are a headache to reverse engineer to the point where you're like, okay, I just don't want. But GWT tokens is just right there. That's what bothers me most is that exposure surface. But again, they're not bad. They have their own purpose, of course. I'm not saying they're bad.
First, I was thinking that the problem seemed like the Mongo version may have had poor SQL injection protection between those versions.
Possibly, yes.
And that could have exposed the whole thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is your application seems ideal for progressive web application is for people who may not have network connectivity at the time. And if you just cached whatever their performance was while they were offline, and then when they reconnect, force them to log in then, you don't have to keep the tokens around. And that seems like a great case for client side rather than server side application.
Yeah. Yes. Not only for, I agree totally with you about the progress tracking, but also about the whole data. since the dictionary data is open source and it's in protobuf, I have been thinking about actually rolling out a version where the user can download that data and they have it right there on their computer, and it becomes an offline version instead of depending on a web version, or whether we can use it as a cache. The only thing is that the data dump is pretty big. It's about 2 to 3 gigabytes. So I did some prototypes with a minified version, a mini dictionary that is about 100 megabytes, and it's actually really, really good. It does the job for when you're offline, you're in the train, you have poor connection, or you're in the airplane, you still want to know how you say, I don't know, cloud in Finnish. You still can look up that instead of depending on the online version. But yes, it's a very good use case. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering, still left a little unclear to me what you meant when you said, okay, Next.js is server components, and like how is that different from the frameworks that you brought up in the presentation? Like, as far as I know, client components are opt-in in Next.js, so you would have to make an active decision to send something to the client with Next.js, and in all the React frameworks with React 19, since that's where server components are now stable. So I just like, what was your like?
What was my meaning behind? If I'm not sure I understand the question.
So what's the difference between using a Next.js app and or building a Next.js app with only server components versus the like examples you gave, or why did you avoid Next.js or other?
Okay, that's yeah. Why did I avoid Next.js and opted for the other solutions? The main reason was because the complex mental system that comes around it, in terms of having to build everything around the Next.js ecosystem, and the authorization, authentication mental model was just too foreign for me. So I had actually to go and spend time into that. So it was more of a business decision. Second, I think the server-side rendering is the way around it. And the server-side rendering, server components is the way around it. But yeah, it was mostly because of the complex mental model around it that took me more time to look into how to do it, how to do just right up and running. Whereas on Flask, for example, it took me literally 2 hours to build that, like the whole functioning minimal viable product. I don't think I would have been able to do that in React in 2 hours. And being confident that there's no circumvoluted things around it. I'm not very, very familiar with Next.js. I was using Nuxt.js, and Nuxt.js, as far as I know, the version 3 was client-side, and you had to actually create the whole server folder, the API server folder, and then do it intentionally. And that still was a headache for me. It was a headache for me to, it's an opinion, of course, I don't think other choices are bad, but for me, creating an API folder with a server folder made me think that, okay, so there's client, and things may spill into client when I don't know, and I have to build that glue code sometimes, because sometimes you don't want to hydrate, you want to refresh the full page. Sometimes you want to hydrate a specific part while making sure that the user is authorized. And that is a layer of complexity that you have to manage through glue code. At least in Nuxt, was just too much for me. I didn't want to the resources didn't really, I had other priorities to focus on. And that's why Flask, for example, and those solutions that I listed kind of take that away from you, because you have the clear MVC architecture and you know who's doing what and where, and I know that I can trust it. but that was for Nuxt. Now I think I mentioned the Next.js as an example, but I'm not very well familiar with Next.js, so I cannot speak in very detail. But I think there are parallels between Nuxt and Next in terms of the way they are. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it sounds to me like you kind of went the way you did because you maybe felt there's like a more server first like
Yes.
approach with those,
Yes.
as opposed to Nuxt, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm not super experienced with Next.js either, but I have done some projects with it, and my feeling is that it's like server first in the sense that you do have to like put an annotation that this file is a client. This file represents a client
Okay.
component.
Okay.
So in that sense, I do feel at least it sounds more server first than Nuxt, but can't say compared to those that
Yes.
you happen to
The
go with,
monolith.
but
Yeah.
it does sound more server first than,
Yeah.
for instance.
And one other point as well was that, for example, Quick was one option I was looking at. Quick, I mean, uses pretty much similar syntax to React. And I was looking into it very much in detail. There was someone from Quick who came from Israel last June, and he was very helpful as well in terms of providing some ideas. And we had some discussion about how we couple the Quick server-side rendering and server rendered components, which were delivered as HTML chunks. And for me, that was like, this is so good. This is exactly what I want. But at the same time, I went deep with Quick actually, and was gluing it with some code with the Kappan Proto and then the protobufs, etc. It was ultra fast because I was working on the speed and low latency. I really wanted that real-time feeling, and Quick was giving that. But I still wasn't, when it got to authentication and authorization is where I started to kind of cringe a little bit, because hydration become problematic when I click on logout and then it logs me out, but somehow the bar doesn't hydrate and I have to actually force that. And it just became additional hard work, which I saw was unnecessary, where the other platforms just provided as like ready for you to use. That was, so it was kind of the balancing between, do I want to go through this technical hurdle because I really like Quick, or business-wise, this works, this goes fast, still does the job, and it's robust and tested. And I can trust it, because I honestly don't trust myself doing authentication and with Quick unless it's really robust and battle proven. And I think, I mean, Flask, I'm language agnostic, I'm brand agnostic. Whatever, I have a table, a matrix, whichever checks the thing, I'm like, okay, this is my right tool for my use case. Turns out Flask, Laravel, Phoenix, and those that I had listed. And Lucky, actually, is a really good one, actually. It's really good. I think it has a very good future because it associates the Ruby syntax, the quick scaffolding and getting up quickly of Ruby, Laravel, and Flask, and simplicity of the syntax, MVC architecture, and also works with inertia with the reactive front ends. So it does a good job, and it's compile time. So I think Lucky has a good future, but still too early for Finnish Companion to use something that's still kind of too early. So that's why for the student portal, we're using Flask, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Right.
Until now.
I feel like I now better understand
Yeah.
your process.
I think the next step, if it becomes overwhelming and Flask can't keep up anymore, would be probably be Laravel or Phoenix, and I think it would be one of those two. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Great talk and
Thank you.
fantastic app idea.
Thank you.
The language dyslexic, so I really appreciate that. Did you have a continuation with the story with the hackers? What was their conclusion? Was there a continuation? And did you consider actually talking to them about it? Like, how did they hack you?
Oh, the don't worry people? No. No. No, I didn't actually even email them. This was their message. You're talking about the Finnish company, correct? Not the Android Tate. Yes. This was their message. No, I didn't actually email them because I just don't try. Why would I do it? I think, honestly, I don't think it is one person. I really think it's an actual chain of people doing it. And if you have seen those couple of YouTube videos of smart hackers who like ethical night style, white knight, thank you, that was the word, white knight hackers who hack into some remote area, who scam people, and they just broadcast their security camera and they're like, hey, we know who you are, we've penetrated your thing, stop scamming people. I think it's that kind of industry. They are open offices of people whose full-time job is to provide tools and resources to other people, but also themselves doing it, and then when there's a hit, there's a hit. Because they go for the numbers. Go for 100, go for 1,000, and then if you get a hit, then that's it. So for me, it was pointless to talk to them. It's just the same as engaging in an email conversation with an email from a Nigerian prince whose father was in the UN and survived and got this gold mine.
Yep. You know that guy who likes to write back to the hackers and leads them on and wastes their time. Maybe learn something. I think they like to brag.
Exactly.
What
but yeah, I think it's money. That's number one thing, and I really felt insulted by that. Don't worry, don't panic, because it's actually supposed to make you panic. It's saying don't panic, but it's actually telling you panic, because we have your data and here's how to get it. But honestly, it was static data. I was pretty happy. In terms of actually, one point that I remember here as well is the actual real sensitive data, like the login data, for example. I personally use just a commercial service for 25 euros per month. I'm happy to pay that, but it's managed. I don't worry about that because of the liability and the responsibility. I just have that weight offloaded from me than having it in my own. Sorry? Supabase. I think it's overkill to go more than that, because the rest of the cloud providers, I think it's just overcharged to have to pay more than that for databases, because otherwise I would just host it in my VPS and I would be happy to do it. But then 25 euros, it's managed for me. They have all those real-time stuff and APIs and so on. I'm pretty happy. But alternatives also are good, by the way, for Supabase. But for that particular usernames, passwords, emailing, and so on, and logs, that goes to the commercial service. Yes.
Yeah, so the Bitcoin address is over there. So can we check that if anybody made transactions there, so people can think like if it's a viable career?
First of all, I want to check. That's a good idea, actually.
There's also the Bitcoin wallet. We can check. It should be, I think, public to check like the actual wallet, how many transactions keep coming in.
I'm not sure how much this is in USD, because it's not accurate now. 0.015 is what?
1564.
No, it's no 1564. So 1 year ago, now it's 106. 1 year. Yeah, something around maybe 500 or so, more or less, just to get the window, more or less. But then you wanted the problem is I would need the text from that. It's gonna take time to retype it, but feel free to take a screenshot thing and check it yourself. Is that detailed enough? Yes.
The feature you talked about, the automatic subtitle translation.
Yep.
I'm just curious how that works. Are you like prefetching the subtitle
No,
files?
it's real time. It's real time, and I'm using a Go compiled backend. It's a separate one from the main one that I'm using, and it's one of those alter ego.
It's real time. The browser extension sends the current subtitle text.
Yes.
And then it gets.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
It's ultra fast. I'm using this. It's a high performance micro web framework, a Go, and it just does that same. I needed it for that particular use case. It's super fast. I'm happy with it. I won't change it. It's compiled. It's stable. I'm happy with it. And yeah, there's no prefetching. It's real time. It's happening real time. Yeah.
We actually checked that Bitcoin address. It has received $52,000.
Okay. So anyone who's thinking to start a very, very, profitable career, maybe start. No, of course not. Sorry. Do you think it's I don't know. Yeah, I think it's unethical still.
Yeah,
of course. But and once you get caught, and but yeah, that was the experience. It started from nothing, of course, but then it happens to other people, of course, as you have seen here, and on the top of the leaks, these you can actually download them and go through the data if you wanted as well. There's more than that. There's also reputational damage as well, since I'm not taking any position on him in particular, but if you're someone who is homophobic and you're live streaming and you get all of those on your live stream, it's pretty also damaging to his reputation. And on the top of that, you have the courses as well that have been leaked, which he sells and monetizes and juices for every single thing, including asking people, if you want to increase your privilege in this Discord server, you have to have a 90 days streak presence online. So I think that's, personally, as a doctor and neuroscientist, it's a slightly sounds gray area to me, because you're apparently weaponizing some psychological things to make people addicted to your platform, which I am heavily against that. It's almost a dark pattern. So, yes.
All right. How long did it take for you to restore your website, the Finnish companion? And was it just you, or do you have a team? Or
it was just me at the time. Now I have a couple of more people who are helping part-time, but at the time it was only me. And when I was going through it, I went through the VPS. The first thing is the VPS. The first reflex when I realized that I use this MongoDB Compass. It's a good app. It's the first thing I saw was, okay, it's locked in. Is it the Docker? Is it the database? Is it the VPS? And the first thing I went is, okay, I'm going to the VPS to see. It wasn't compromised. That was like the first relief is, okay, the VPS, the server's okay. Because that would have been horrible. If the VPS, they got access into my server, then I would question many things. But then once I realized this, I went into the database. I don't really remember what I did, but I did try something like a restore function or something. I don't really remember, but it reversed immediately. And that's where I was like, okay, I need to go radical And the radical meant getting into the terminal of my SSHing into my server, going into the Docker, seeing what's happening. I saw the logs, I saw everything, and I was like, okay, delete this whole thing. I'm starting a new Docker instance with a new MongoDB, uploaded data, and that was it. And of course, the privileges. Oh, how long?
Realized that your website was compromised to restoring it.
Oh, that in total it took about 24 hours down from the moment we realized until it was back to operations.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you for introducing the Finnish component as I'm learning Finnish right now, so it's a great thing. So my question is like, you decided to go with the monolithic architecture, and it's really easy to develop and really hard to maintain when the application grows, isn't it?
Actually, is that a question you're asking or a statement you're making?
No, I mean, I want to know that why did you go with the monolithic architecture?
It's actually, the reasons are, of course, the ones I've stated, mostly security, authentication, and those, not exposing the endpoints and things like that, but also maintainability over the long course. I think they are made for that, especially I don't want to sound like I'm preaching this and that, because I think each one, but it sounds, for example, that Laravel, you can trust it to run a business, for example. In this case, it's a not-for-profit business, but I can trust it and I can grow pretty quickly. It has the MVC architecture, which I think is really dependable. Either it's Laravel or the likes like Symfony, Cake, PHP, and so on. Flask, Django. I mentioned Flask because I just find it a little bit more like a Swiss knife. You can do things pretty quickly, but Django is also relevant. It just may be heavier to get started with and setting up things. But if by the moment you start, you already have so many things, then Django is a good fit. But no, it's not hard. On the contrary, I find it actually easy to maintain and to grow. It became difficult actually with Nuxt to grow and maintain, especially when we want to transition to new features. It became harder because you have the components folder and you have the pages folder and you have the API folder, the server folder, and you have to really, it becomes, once it grows too fast, it becomes a bit more difficult. But if it's tiny, you want a prototype, things like that, yes, Nuxt, all of them are good. Nuxt, Next, Svelte, Solid, all of those, yeah.
So your suggestion for the nowadays, which stack should be the focus for the front-end developer, as per your experience and Finnish companies?
In general?
In general, Finnish company is concerned.
Oh, that's a pretty heavy statement to prescribe, because I think each one depends on what you want to do. I have a client in the healthcare industry here in Finland. They wanted to build, they had their own patient system. I'm trying to remain anonymous. They had their own patient system, and their patient system provider didn't accept using Finnish payment gateways, so they needed to build their own interface and their own platform. I went with Laravel for that. Because it just had all what it needed, including cron jobs and job queues and things like that, where it had to handle messaging and channels with other external providers. That was good. They had one specific service which was written in JavaScript, which was just badly written in the healthcare industry. That one was done. They wanted it in very dependable and robust, and that was done in Go, because Go for me is just good with type safety, especially the binary and compiling. You compile it and it's fast as it can be. Of course, it's garbage collected, but for web, it's really good. And the syntax is easy. It's really approachable, super easy to use. Whereas Rust is that same category, but just harder, especially with the syntax. Unless you really want something that is super critical, then go with Rust. But overall, I don't think it's on a case-by-case basis. You can, For me, right now, I think those 4 monoliths are good. Next can be good as well for their own use cases as well. But once you get into industry standard, you don't pretty much see Next or Nuxt around. And I think there's a reason for it. I work on a daily basis in the hospital, and I've seen Vue in some certain interfaces, but the backbone is actually, it was in C#, in ASP, because it's enterprise and they have something to do with Microsoft. But I'm sure it would have been something that monolithic as well, because they have very strict requirements. So in my opinion, it's those big 4, Phoenix, Laravel, Flask / Django, and Lucky. If you want a platform, you can go tiny, like for example with Astro. Astro can be good if you need like a content website, but some interactivity. If you really need specific small reactivity and interactivity, like drop-down lists, filtering, tabs. I mean, honestly, jQuery can still do the job, and it does it pretty well. So it depends on what you need. But for businesses, I think those 4 are pretty robust. There's one to watch also. Is called Frankenstein PHP, which I found to be very interesting because it delivers a binary, and it relies on Go on the back. So you still write PHP code, and then when you deliver it, you don't have to manage all the DevOps. You just deliver a binary with the environment and all the credentials already compiled in there. So for me, I think it could simplify things and make them more smoother, less complex. But again, I don't want to be prescriptive because each use case is very special.
To be honest, more specific, I want to say, like, I had some experience with Vue.js and Laravel, and I did apps like online shopping.
Yes.
So my concern is, as I'm not in the line of coding and all those things for the last 3 years due to other job in Finland. So my concern is if I start my career as a front-end developer specific. So
so for your career, you mean?
Because as I have like Vue.js and Laravel.
Yes.
experience.
Just keep going with Vue.js and Laravel. You have already the knowledge, and Laravel is like, since you're working as a consultant or as an expert developer, then you're working very likely with small, medium businesses who wants to have an online shop and so on. So Laravel is really good for that. And then with Vue, you're doing the job, and it's safe and secure.
But I didn't see that much job advertisement in Finland, like with this tech. That's why I asked that question.
Advancement?
I mean the job advertisement in the Finland as a front-end developer. I didn't see that use techs that much. Only I've seen like the Java.
Well, if you want to work as an employee, it's a different thing, of course. If you're working as a consultant, as an expert who provides software development for clients, and they come and they trust you with what you're going to provide them, then go with Laravel and Vue. If you want to be an employee in a certain company, it depends on what sector and what company. I think it's too vague to say like this, because if you want to go in Finland, very specific in Finland, if you want to go in the healthcare sector, for example, in healthcare IT sector for healthcare software, then it's Java, ASP, C#, maybe a little bit of Vue. That's what I've seen, and I use it on a daily basis, but it's mostly Java.
Spring Boot also, right?
Sorry?
Spring Boot.
Yes, Spring Boots. It can be, actually, they do use Spring Boots for certain hospitals. They use actually Spring Boots, but yeah, it's that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome.
We don't have any other questions.
Thank you.